I've watched it all in 30 days before, but I was also depressed, so don't know if that counts.
It's a depression watch. I understand.
It's just like I would just literally come home and put it on for the rest of the time I was awake, and I wasn't sleeping, so I watched a lot of Psych.
Adam really enjoys Psych.
It is my comfort show through and through.
I had run out of things to watch on YouTube that I usually watch, and I was like, oh, the people I follow have already talked about this week's chapter of One Piece. There's no new comic thing I kind of want to look into, and I was like, wow, there's nothing on my YouTube feed. And I just kept scrolling, and then it was like a 3-hour video comparing Sherlock Holmes to Psych, and I was like, I've never seen Psych, but it was so compelling that I decided that I needed to watch the show. What I should have done today is started watching more episodes of Batman and Superman and then taking notes, but I think that'll be a tomorrow thing. I lounged around. Well. Kevin, what are you doing?
I was putting on lip balm.
Thank you for joining me once again to talk about Batman the Animated Series.
Oh, yeah.
It's always a pleasure to have you. I know that you've been busy recently.
A little bit, but I am ready and excited.
I'm also ready and excited. X amount of episodes ago, I think it was during a Joker episode, you made a very bold statement to me, and you said that out of all of Batman's rogues, you thought that Poison Ivy would have been the one to off him. It's always just baffled me that out of the group, out of the lineup.
Yeah, I mean, she's arguably the smartest of them. I'd say Dr. Freeze, Mr. Freeze, wow. Mr. Freeze is up there too, but I think she's the smartest and Poison works on everyone. I think that's a good way to put it. And recently she has become a planner and like a multifaceted character. At one point she wasn't, but I think especially in this show, she's a very compelling and deep character.
Do you have any examples other than the show?
I don't know if you ever listened to it. I think we might have talked a little bit about it. There was that Batman audio adventure, whatever you want to call it, Batman Unburied.
I think I may have listened to the very first episode, but nothing further than that.
I listened to it all, and she shows up at the end, and she's low-key scary in it, not gonna lie. She's like a university student who goes on a trip, I don't remember where, but her professor tries to like put a move on her, and they like start fighting, and she ends up in a magic tree and gains powers, or her father may have done experiments on her with poisons or something, but pretty much she like melted the dude's face off with acid she could make from her body. And yeah, she'd just be, I don't know, poisonous.
Venomous. I have not too much to say about Poison Ivy outside of what I'm about to reference in this episode. I don't think I've read a lot of things with Poison Ivy in it. As a focal villain, I think in a chapter of Long Halloween, she does something with Bruce Wayne, and then Catwoman has to go save Bruce Wayne from Poison Ivy. But that's just one of the many things that happen.
In Batman Hush, she does the kryptonite lipstick thing and just takes control of Superman really quickly and easily. She could have done that at any point, and she very much knew she could have, but I don't know. She's always kind of been the half-hearted villain that this show thrives with, like Mr. Freeze, her, Harley Quinn kind of too. The ones that aren't totally evil. Yeah. They just have one goal, and sometimes they'll compromise their morals for that one goal, but there's still a line they don't cross.
Well, this episode is called Pretty Poison, which I said at the end of one of our previous episodes. I think the title card was just the rose that is in this episode.
I believe so.
The episode begins with a flashback. The colors are muted, and once I watched it through, I realized it was a flashback, but once I started the episode the first time, I was like, is there something wrong with this episode? Or like, is there something wrong with my TV? Did something happen? But like, all the colors have been muted, and someone's digging up a flower on a hill, looking over the opening of the land for a future penitentiary. Harvey Dent has funded, with the help of Bruce Wayne, the construction of a prison, and the guy that's giving the speech before Harvey Dent is welcome to the stage. He brings up that Harvey was the newly appointed district attorney, and since this flashback happens 5 years ago, I'm like, oh, Harvey's been a district attorney for 5 years. Mm-hmm. But as Harvey Dent steps up to the stage, he says, from this field of weeds and wildflowers will grow a new institution to build a better, safer Gotham. And then him and Bruce dig up a little plant from the ground, and they take a picture of it for the newspapers. And as the attending audience cheers and takes photos, it transitions to one of those photos in a newspaper, and the same hands that dug up the flowers flowers, tear the picture out of the newspaper and tacks it on the wall. And right below it are those same roses that were dug up earlier in a small crate. And the figure tends to the roses, watering them. And then we transition back to the site of the future penitentiary. Those roses that are growing wild in the field start to become excavated in the pursuit of this upcoming prison. And I think it's really, really funny that it shows more and more construction vehicles start to clear the area as it transitions to, quote, a better, safer Gotham 5 years later.
5 years later, I didn't realize at first that it was a flashback. I don't know if I just wasn't locked in yet. But
I didn't either.
Like, I had no clue. I was just like, oh, this is where they bring in Harvey for the first time. It's a little Harvey Dent origin. And then if it flash forward 5 years later, I'm like, oh, wait, it's coming back. Most other major kind of media Two-Face things we've seen is he's the new DA. It's been a few months, then he's evil now. But it's like, no, he was doing this for 5 years and doing his job well. To me, it set up a part of the world that I didn't think I needed, but I definitely loved it.
I don't know if it adds on or takes away from the Joker idea of one bad day, flips the character, because with, as you said, most iterations, he's a newly appointed DA, district attorney, and then he becomes Two-Face. But in this iteration, he's been doing it for at least 5 years, and he still is not Two-Face. Was this beating him down over time, and then he becomes Two-Face?
Okay, I see your point, because to me, it almost makes the argument stronger, because he's been doing it for so long. It would be like if the whole point where that kind of comes from, the Killing Joke with Gordon, how he's been doing it for so long, and yeah, he's beaten down and everything, but Joker thinks all it takes is just one really bad day to flip anyone over the edge, and no matter how long you've done it, whether you're brand new or the 15-year vet, one bad day is going to do it. And I think that this part of the world kind of proves that point, even though it's not exactly a theme of this world, just I guess kind of the character in general.
I gotcha. So, after it shows the better, safer Gotham, quote-unquote, 5 years later, the penitentiary has been built, and immediately a helicopter lands in the prison, allowing for a prisoner to escape by air. And multiple times this will happen in this episode, but at the GCPD, Gordon is alerted, and he informs the officers of the situation, and they leave to pursue the criminals. And in the background, Harvey Bullock, he was eating a donut. He leaves with the rest of the officers, but then goes back for one more donut. I was like, fat joke, I see. This will happen again. I'm going to refer to Harvey Bullock as just Bullock, as to not confuse him with Harvey Dent.
Okay, fair enough.
There's only one important Harvey. But the GCPD tail the criminals throughout Gotham. It's a really cool scene because you see them leave the police department and they're like driving through the streets as the criminals are fleeing by air, only for us to see Batman on top of a building grappling onto the getaway helicopter. And with a heavy, heavy dose of copium, the pilot reassures the other criminal that, it's just turbulence. I was like, you fool.
One other thing that I just kind of thought of too, that the whole 5 years later thing, it's kind of, I think, implied that he was Batman during the groundbreaking for the prison too. They're like, how you help this city with your generous donations. There's no one who has given more to this city than you, or something along those lines. But the way he kind of like smirked at that line, I was like, he's already Batman. So, when you come into this, it's never really clear how long he's been Batman. You can tell it's been some time, but now you're like, he's been doing it at least 5 years. He's in it. He's not like a newbie here who's still kind of learning things. He is in it, which does kind of fit with what we've seen in the other stuff with all the detective work, computer stuff. He just dives right into it. He knows the sort of process now,
I think that would be something fun to talk about later, to see as we continue to watch this show, if we could maybe piece together a guesstimate as to how long he's been Batman, because there are flashbacks throughout the series, and I think that'd be kind of cool. But after the getaway driver tells the other criminal that it's just turbulence, we pan down from the skyline to the Rose Cafe, where Harvey Dent is meeting up with a very pretty redhead. They order food, and Harvey insists that they eat, but the woman asks if they should wait for his friend, only for Harvey to tell her that Bruce is always late and that he probably got hung up on business. And then from here, we start transitioning between what's happening with Harvey and the redhead and Batman and what he's up to. It cuts from the cafe to Batman apprehending the criminal as Batman is dangling through the air, still grappling onto the helicopter, managing to wrap the cord around a passing satellite tower on top of a building, anchoring the helicopter, forcing it to crash into the side of the building. And I was like, gosh darn, Batman, that's very quick thinking on your feet.
okay, now this could just be because it's a kid show, it's a cartoon, Batman doesn't kill. I was like, that was kind of like violent for this show. It was not a soft crash. Everything shattered. Normally when you see that, things blow up. I'm like, it didn't blow up here. But like I said, I'm going to choose to think that it was a calculated play on Batman's part and that he knew that it was never really going to be anything big.
I mean, fair, and also with what he was working with, which I assume is everything on his person, how do you stop a helicopter with, like, the least amount of damage?
The force of Batman.
But after Batman wraps his grappling cord around a passing satellite tower, it anchors the helicopter, forcing it to crash onto the building. And as the criminals recover inside the helicopter, they're like, whoa, what happened? And then Batman, like, jump scares them, appearing, like, right outside. And I was like, oh, no. And then we transition back to the cafe, where the woman has heard that Bruce is rich. And Harvey tells her that he runs around with a high-class crowd. Transitioning to Batman, running across the rooftops, chasing the criminal. And then he tackles him, pinning him over the edge of a building. And as they struggle, they start to, like, roll as to who's pinning who over the edge. And then the guy has Batman pinned over the edge. And he has a pipe in his hand. And he's about to strike him. And then we transition back to Harvey and the redhead for Harvey to mention that Bruce still gets his kicks too, as Batman kicks the criminal off of him. I'm like, I really like the rhythm of it. It's really cool to have that conversation happening while Batman's doing this stuff, and everything that Harvey's using to describe Bruce is still everything that Batman is getting up to. And I'm like, that's cool. Harvey assures her that there's nothing they don't know about each other. And with Batman, he apprehends the criminal. As the criminal questions, who is he? Only be told, I'm your worst nightmare. You can use
That's such a hard line.
You can use your Batman voice.
My Batman voice?
Yeah.
I don't know if I have a Batman voice right now. I'm kind of fighting through some allergies, but
I've heard many.
Oh boy. Just because I'm Kevin, I gotta pull out a Kevin Conroy voice. Okay. I'm your worst nightmare.
Got it.
Nice.
So, as Batman tells this to the criminal, the police finally arrive and Batman bails. Back with Harvey, he thinks that she'll really like him, and she confirms that if he's a friend to Harvey, then she obviously will enjoy him. We cut back to Batman, who is heading back to the Batcave, and he calls Alfred to inform Harvey that he'll be late. But Alfred's one step ahead of him, and he informs him that he's already told his company. And once Batman arrives, Alfred already has a car idling full of gas and a food recommendation for Bruce. I really enjoy that Batman shows up, and he's like, I want this car. And Alfred's like, oh, but of course, it's already waiting out front for you. And I was like, oh, yeah.
I like this part because I guess it's not the first time we've kind of seen the Batman's running late trope. People are waiting for him. It's cutting back and forth to him doing Batman stuff while they're like waiting. Like, I feel like that was a big, like, kind of Christopher Nolan Batman type thing.
Yes.
But like, what that part always left out was it would cut straight from, oh, he has the bad guys to him rushing to the Batmobile, and then it cuts to him at dinner or whatever. It never showed him going back, getting changed, switching cars, and then coming back out. And like, as I was sitting there, I was like, I guess he would have to do that. Like, he can't just hide the armored tank somewhere and bring along a suit with him everywhere he goes. I guess he would have to go back home, change, and switch out to his rinky-dink little sports car. That's a very human Batman thing. And then just all the Alfred stuff is just like the cherry on top that shows here's the human Batman that we've been missing so far.
Super off topic. Not super off topic. For one of the million reasons I believe that Incredibles is like the perfect superhero movie, I respect that in the early part of the Incredibles, he is in his superhero car and then it like transitions into a normal car and it also like changes his outfit. I was like, that's nice. I was like, that's wonderful. Yeah. But it cuts to Bruce talking with Harvey and the lady until she has to leave. She has a meeting in the morning. They kiss for quite a moment, and Bruce watches, and it's really funny because they start kissing. At first, Bruce is looking, he looks away, then he looks back, and they're still kissing. Then he checks his watch, and then he just leans on one of his hands as they continue to kiss. I was like, this is a long kiss. And then she leaves. Bruce asks if she has a sister, only for Harvey to tell him that Pam is one of a kind. Harvey plans on marrying her, which gets it gets him to spit out his water. And I was like, yes, that's a good friend right there. Because he says that they've only known each other for like a week. And he was like, when you know it's the one, you know it's the one. And they go back and forth. And as they're going back and forth, Harvey is like patting himself with the towel. And he's like pulling at his collar, exasperating of how hot it is until he passes out into his dessert. And at first, Bruce laughs about it. He's like, Harvey. And then he's like, Harvey? And then he pulls him out and he's unconscious. And then they rush him to the hospital immediately. I think is a really cool scene for Harvey getting in the hospital, and then they're rushing him into like the ER, and it's like a point of view shot from Harvey, and like you see the doctors like popping in from either side, like leaning over like into his perspective, and I'm like, that's a really cool shot as they like go through like doorway to doorway. Really, really nice transition. But for the second time today, Gordon gets a call telling him that Harvey's in the ICU, and the entire GCPD rolls out a second time. And again, Bullock goes back for another donut. And I'm like, the fat joke. At the hospital, Gordon asks for an update, and they think he's been poisoned. And Gordon sends Bullock back to the Rose Cafe to interrogate the staff, and Gordon wants guards for Harvey around the clock. And as that's starting to cool down a little bit, Bruce is able to ask the doctor. I appreciate how himbo it is of Bruce, because he's like, so Doc, is it like food poisoning or something? And the doctor thinks it's much worse and that they need to find an antidote fast. And after the doctor leaves, Bruce, with his sneaky little hands, steals a little blood sample. And I'm like, oh, no. I was like, a little sneaky. And then it cuts to probably, I think, the funniest part of this episode, where Bullock is at the Rose Cafe questioning the chef as to what he put in the mousse. And the chef's like, chocolate, sugar, eggs, cream, and then both like, strychnine? And he's like, no strychnine. But I added just a pinch of vanilla. And I was like, okay.
So good, because Bullock in this like made me kind of fall in love with that like character, because you don't want to like him. He's a jerk who's terrible at his job when you really stop and think.
Yeah.
But like he was so lovable, and he has so many like moments that make you realize maybe he's not so bad.
I think even in one of the future episodes, I think the episode's called Point of View or POV, where it's him, Montoya, and a third person, and they're all recounting the same event that happened with like Batman. I was like, you're an idiot, but I was like, I don't quite hate you.
Like, he thinks he's, like, so good at what he does, but then you stop and you're like, at least he's trying to help people.
But after we leave that, it transitions to Batman at the Batcomputer. He is able to deduce that the poison is derived from the wild thorny rose, and Batman plans to get a plant sample from the Gotham Botanical Gardens to reverse engineer a cure. But Alfred informs him, like the alpha individual in the situation, that the rose has been extinct for 5 years, so no antidote. And I was like, oh no. And since there's been so many roses in this episode, I'm like, oh, Pamela has it. And then we cut back to the hospital where Pamela arrives to see Harvey. And she wants to get in, but she's denied. And then she starts to like boohoo. And Bruce consoles her and then walks her back to the car. And then she tries to kiss him. Just a slight, like Bruce is just like, oh. And I was like, oh.
And then when they are hugging, you like see his like face, and to me this is what points to him being like a more seasoned Batman. He's like in that trust no one phase where like as soon as it happens he's like, wait a second. And there are also a couple things in that kind of Batcave scene that I thought were interesting and I really liked. So one, when he's driving back to the Batcave in his like normal car and like day clothes, he calls Alfred and is like, I'm bringing a sample, blah, blah, blah. But the thing that stuck out to me is he's still talking in his Bruce voice, I think. It's not his Batman voice. So like we've seen him talk in his Batman voice when he's still like in Bruce clothes and stuff. But I was like, is it because he's like on a public roadway? Like even if he's like completely boxed in his car, he's still not doing it. I'm like, is that just him being so cautious? Or like, I am curious what that kind of choice was from an actor's point of view.
The other time, like when he was on the call with the dude on leather wings, he went from Batman to Bruce Wayne. It was Batman business, but I think it was like personal Bruce Wayne business because Harvey's in trouble. And
yeah, okay.
That's the only thing I can argue. I don't know. It's closer to him than the other thing was.
Yeah, and then the other thing is whenever Alfred tells him that the plant is extinct, he then like goes and fact checks him, searches it on his like thing, and he's like, you're right. And I was hoping and praying that somewhere deep down, Alfred was just going to be like, did you think I was going to lie to you? Like, what is this? But I was like so close.
Oh yes, I'm going to endanger your best friend, Master Wayne. So Bruce walks into her car. She tries to kiss him, but Bruce avoids it. And she tells him that Harvey is lucky to have a good friend. And as soon as she leaves, he then asks Alfred to dig up what he can on Pamela Ivesley. Who she is, where she's been, what she's done, the works. And we transition to the Batcave. And Alfred starts to inform Bruce that she's a research chemist for a cosmetics firm. She has a PhD in botany from GCU, Gotham City University, and offers a monthly lecture on endangered plants. Yeah, and then Batman makes an offhand comment that I think that Harvey's engagement is off. And I was like, I think it's really interesting. And the 90s Spider-Man show does a similar thing where most characters that have any sort of schooling that went to college, so far in Batman the Animated Series, have ties to GCU because Scarecrow had ties to GCU.
Yeah.
The people on the Leather Wings, I don't think they worked for them.
They had funding or something that was tied to it, I think.
Yes. But I do appreciate that because in the 90s Spider-Man cartoon, like Morbius was a student that went to Peter's school and he was turned into a thing, and then Dr. Connors worked there, etc. But after Batman makes the comment that Harvey's engagement is off, we transition to Batman arriving. Well, you get the scene where you see the Batmobile, and then you see a gate, and then you see a building further down, and then you see Batman on the building. And Batman arrives at the Botanical Gardens from the roof. He attempts to infiltrate from the skylight, stalking Pamela. And she's complimenting her rose, telling it that she won't clip off any more petals unless I need them. And it was at this point that I think I made a note a little further down, but I was like, while you made the claim that she's like his most dangerous villain, Joker, not that he doesn't weird me out, but I expect as much from Joker. But from here to the end of the episode, I was like, you're really weirding me out, Pamela Isley.
It's also at this point where it clicks that she has been planning this for 5 years.
Mm-hmm. She's crazy.
Oh, yeah.
But she turns off the lights and turns on music for her plants. Fun fact that comes from comic book media, music does help plants grow. There's a study in everything, like classical music. There you go. That's it for the episode. That's all the information I can give. I went no further into that. But she turns off the lights and turns on the music for her plants and changes. And Batman begins to infiltrate. And he falls immediately into a trap door full of cacti. And then he goes to grab a vine and escapes. But the vine wraps around him. And I was like, oh no. And it pulls him towards a massive Venus flytrap, dragging him towards its mouth. And we can see how unprepared and visibly distressed Batman is trying to, get away from being consumed.
That plant thing, I don't know if freaked me out was the right word, but it always, stuck out to me. I was like, that's a really cool thing Batman has to fight. It's a Venus flytrap with massive teeth. I actually had a little action figure that was based off it, that you push a button and the mouth would, open and close, and it was kind of sharp, and, it kind of hurt if you got, your, finger caught in there. Probably not a great kid's toy, but it was fun to play with.
I think the noise that the Venus flytrap makes is pretty freaky, especially whenever it's killed. Spoiler alert.
Oh my god, that sound haunted my dreams as a kid.
That is also a note I make a little later down. I was like, okay, because the further Batman got into Poison Ivy's territory, he's out of his element. This lady's nuts. He wasn't prepared for living plants and getting poisoned. It got out of his control very, very, very quickly.
Maybe crazy, but she's also a genius, and it is fully shown here where she traps Batman probably more than any of the other villains we've really seen. She traps him in a more effective way than anything we've really seen up to this point, I think.
Yes, I agree. As Batman is trying to escape being eaten, Pamela returns. As Batman is trapped within the vines of the flytrap, Batman says that he's here for Harvey. I think he just says Harvey, or I'm here for Harvey. And, I think he says, Harvey's been poisoned, or something like that. And then Pamela's like, oh no, he's not going to make it. And then she starts to cry. And then it devolves into a maniacal laughter. And Batman's like, why? As he's struggling to not be eaten. And she wants Harvey dead for murder. And I was like, what are you talking about? And she's building a penitentiary atop of where the now extinct Flowers used to live. Their quote unquote blood is on his hands. As she starts uncomfortably grunting, and I was like, I don't like this. It was
she crazy. Later, as it goes on, you can watch her go more and more crazy. She just starts shrieking and yelling. She just starts to make guttural noises, and I'm like, oh god. I'm like, there's no words in those. She just literally starts shrieking at some points, and again, that noise also haunts me a little bit.
Give me one moment. I'm going to find the part in the episode and just, like, read what she says, because she's crazy. She is, like, I don't know what else to say.
She's insane, but she's so smart. She's crazy, and she has so many skills, and she uses them all so well, and it's so scary.
Smart, crazy is the worst kind of crazy.
Ugh.
So, Batman's fighting off the Venus Flytrap, and as he's trying to not get eaten, he's, like, kicking in the creature's teeth, and then Poison Ivy turns the lights back on in the botanical gardens, and she reveals herself from behind a tree, and she's like, what do I owe the honor? And all he says is Harvey Dent. And she says, oh, the poor district attorney, I hear he's not expected to live. Oh, it's so sad. And then she starts to cry, and then, as I said, it just devolves into a maniacal laughter, and I was like, okay. And all Batman has to say is, why, Ivesley? And she's like, please call me Poison Ivy. And then she gets close to him and says, you see, Harvey has to pay for his crime. And he says, what crime? And she says, why, murder, of course. Plowing up a field of beautiful flowers for that silly penitentiary of his. This little rose would be extinct today if I hadn't saved my precious from those horrible bulldozers.
Solemn.
The blood of those flowers are on his hands. And then she just starts uncomfortably grunting. And I was like, and then she recomposes herself.
She just starts to, like, glide off the edge. Like, she's so calm and collected at first, and then, like, as she starts to, like, think and talk, it's like, oh, she's inching further from being a passable human being.
Yes, I put, and it was at this moment I realized how crazy this lady is.
Mm-hmm.
She says Harvey's fate was sealed with a kiss as she takes out and applies some lipstick, and I'm like, cool, more detective, because we were already informed that she works cosmetics, and she has a PhD in botany, and I was like, okay. And Poison Ivy kisses Batman. First kiss of the series, there you go, Batman. Unwanted. And he attempts to spit it out before it's too late, but he gets poisoned, and she tells him that the fragrance is titled Rose from the Dead. And then Batman just kicks her away, and then he begins to cut his way out of the Flytrap. The Flytrap makes a dinosaur-like roar, which I am not okay with. It's a horrendous sound.
It's awful.
Maybe, just maybe, I'll record it separately and just insert it just so people can hear it. This is Editing Shad. You're about to hear a horrendous sound, and I'm sorry, maybe you want to turn your volume down for just the next couple of seconds. Sorry and thank you.
It makes my skin crawl, genuinely.
Yeah, I think why it creeps me out. The first time I heard the noise come from it, I was like, I didn't know what I was supposed to expect from its mouth. And then the sound of it dying, I was like, I didn't like that either. But once Batman gets out, Batman is fighting to stay conscious, and she's armed with a little, like, arm-mounted crossbow, and I'm like, strange weapon choice for her. Like, it's okay, but
it checks out, though, like, poisoning darts and stuff.
That makes sense. I didn't think of it like that. It was just, I don't know, she just had some metal wrist thing, and she was like, crossbow.
I always thought that that's kind of the best way for her to do, like, long-range poison.
So, as Batman gets out, he's trying to stay conscious. She shoots him with an arm crossbow, calling him a murderer, and he invades. It kills a Flytrap. And I am even less okay with the sound this creature makes this time, in all caps. Batman tries to grapple onto the ceiling lights, but they fall down, and the lighting fixture falls onto a tree, and it sets the entire garden ablaze. And I was like, oh no. And then Poison Ivy...
Peter starts shrieking.
Yes, I don't know. If Batman clocked in and clocked out, before and after every single time he's Batman. After this day, Batman's not a drinker. But this would be I need a drink after work. Yes. I was just trying to...
Yeah, no, this is a tough day at work where you need a nice stiff drink.
I was just trying to research into a plant to make my friend not die. And then I had to fight a Venus Flytrap. And then I lit the botanical garden on fire. And this lady started grunting at me and kissed me.
All of the noises were just so bad.
All of the noises were bad. But Poison Ivy screams, grabs her flower, and attempts to escape as the flames begin to erupt around her. Before something collapses on her, Batman tackles her out of the way. And now, Batman is about to fall into that trap door from earlier, and Poison Ivy is about to deal the finishing blow until he reveals that he has the rose and barters the antidote for the quote-unquote weed. And I didn't even really think about it the first time I watched it through. But whenever I watched it through a second time, I was like, did Batman tackle her out of the way to save her? Or was that just to get the weed so that he could use it?
I mean, I'm going to leave that up to the universe.
We already saw earlier, he crashed a helicopter into a building.
It was calculated. It was a twofold plan. That's exactly why. No ulterior motives.
No ulterior motives. She agrees. She gives him the antidote and she takes the flower. She begins cradling it and calling it stuff like, my precious baby, pretty baby.
Again, Gollum.
I had a really artistic, fun idea for the picture for this episode, but I think maybe I'll make Gollum, but make it like Poison Ivy with the rose.
Oh my god.
I think that's the plan. But Batman is able to forge themselves a way out, and she just follows him cradling the flower, and then they make it out.
He grabs a chair and just runs through the glass wall with a chair that's still partially on fire, and just tosses it out, and whenever they're standing next to each other after this was the first time where it kind of clicked. I'm like, man, in this world, Batman is a big buff dude. Because up until then, you've kind of seen him next to other bigger buff henchmen dudes. That's kind of what you're looking at. And obviously with Captain Clown, he looked tiny, but he's just standing next to an average-sized woman, and he looks massive, like a brick wall. I'm like, that's kind of crazy.
I think whenever Alfred had found information on her, on the picture, it said that she was 5'2", and I was like, that's a tiny little lady.
But he just looked like a big dude.
He is a big dude.
You wouldn't want to mess with him type, which I guess it's true. Batman should be probably a pretty beefy dude.
So, after that entire shenanigan, we transition to Harvey in the hospital, and Harvey wakes up, and Bruce tells him that his engagement with Isley, and he's like, we're friends, right? And you know I have your best interest at heart, and I have to be honest with you. And Harvey's like, yeah. He says, Pamela's wrong for you, and I was like, aw.
Lay it on me, bud.
But after that, it cuts to the penitentiary, where we go, it's a shot in the prison, a shot deeper in the prison, a shot of Poison Ivy with her little plant, and then she's rocking herself back and forth as she begins speaking to the rose, and the episode ends with her saying, they can bury me in the ground as deep as they like, but I'll grow back. We always grow back, don't we, baby? And I was like, okay.
Arguably the creepiest villain we've gotten so far.
I can get behind that, because the only thing I would personally edge it off for would be maybe Man-Bat, but the Man-Bat thing wasn't, the more of the drugs he was taking, the Man-Bat wants to come out. And I was like, that's not you.
She's the most well thought out, organized, creepiest villain I think we've gotten. She planned for 5 years. She had a cork board filled with targets. These people killed plants. They are and she probably worked through that list, which is probably why it took her 5 years to get to Harvey, because he fell at the bottom of that list. God knows what the damage she's done prior to this. I don't know. Again, 5 years on a plan is crazy. To have beef with one person for 5 years, a person who doesn't even know you, is ridiculous.
There's a quote in my brain that's fighting to get out. Have you seen Bullet Train?
Yes.
It was whenever the Hispanic dude came to kill Brad Pitt, and he's like, dude, I don't even know you.
Yeah.
They used Poison Ivy very, very well in this episode. Poison Ivy is threatening. Yes, she is tiny, but she's very, very smart to make up for being tiny, and she's even crazier to make up for being tiny, and she gave Batman a decent run for his money.
Like I said, I feel like out of everything we've seen so far, this is the one that is probably the hardest for Batman. And that's including Scarecrow, who literally used his parents to haunt Batman.
Hard knocks.
Batman still had a plan to deal with that. He's like, I'm just gonna Batman up and deal with it. And then this one, he was like, if she didn't shoot at him, I don't think he really had a plan, frankly.
No.
I think he was going off pure vibes and improv. And he happened to get lucky.
He said bad vibes.
If she didn't shoot at him, he was going down hard.
Yeah, because he could have cut out of it, but the thing wouldn't have stopped.
Yeah, it was just, like I said, you could tell how that this is probably the first time we've really seen how caught off guard Batman was. Like, things catching on fire wasn't part of the plan. Falling in a trapdoor wasn't part of the plan. Getting smooched, not part of the plan.
No, none of it was part of the plan. Some of these things, I do wonder how different the difficulty would be with Robin about, and or, I don't know, if Robin were there, how would the situation have been shifted?
Confronting a help or a liability in this situation.
Confronting an enemy that they haven't come up against. With the other Robin episode that we've watched, at least, it was Joker, and we know that he's gone up against Joker. I assume all the other rogues Batman has been up against before Robin. So all of these things Batman already had intel on for Robin to know about. But I wonder how, as you said, would it have been a help? Would it have hindered him to perform being Batman?
You also have to keep in mind Robin is a teenage boy and Poison Ivy is Poison Ivy.
Poison Ivy is a hot, tiny redhead.
That's kind of her whole shtick.
We know Dick Grayson likes hot redheads, so...
That is true.
He may not have made it out of that one alive.
Yeah, that might have been a...
bad matchup.
That might his kryptonite there.
Oh, the women. Okay, well, do you have any closing thoughts about this episode?
Not that I can really think of, other than some of those noises haunted me as a kid.
Okie dokie. Well, that was pretty poison. The next episode is called The Underdwellers.
I remember nothing.
I don't remember this episode either.
This is probably the first time I've gone in and I'm like, oh, I'm pretty much clueless. Like, I don't know who the villain is. I don't know. I don't have a vague clue, really. So I'm interested.
The next episode is called The Underdwellers. I'm looking at the list and I'm actually excited about, it's really just banger after banger. I don't know what The Underdweller has. The POV episode I brought up is after The Underdweller.
Okay.
The Forgotten is after that, and that is the episode where he loses his memory and joins a chain gang. It's an episode about human trafficking, so that's a fun topic.
Is that Mad Hatter?
No, it's just some guy.
Oh, okay.
And then after that is another Joker episode, and then episode 10 is Two-Face.
That one's going to be fun.
So we are on our way. I'm very excited for all of these.
Was this 5 or 6?
5.
Okay.
5 episodes in Batman the Animated Series. 5 of 85. 80 episoos left.
Hey, Rome wasn't built in a day.
All right. Thank you for joining me tonight, Kevin. I will see you next episode.
Woohoo!
Woohoo. All right. Peace.